Every summer, folks walk into the grocery store or stop by a farmer's market and head straight for the tomatoes. Some pick the brightest red one, some squeeze every tomato in the pile, others simply grab whatever's on top, hope for the best, and head home. Then comes dinner. The tomato looks beautiful, but the first bite tells a different story. It's pale inside, watery, mealy, almost no sweetness at all. It fills the sandwich, but it doesn't taste like much of anything. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. There was a time when buying a good tomato wasn't a matter of luck. Farm families knew exactly what to look for, not because they had special equipment, but because they understood what a ripe tomato looked, felt, and even smelled like. Those little habits have slowly disappeared. Today, most shoppers are guessing, but they don't have to. These aren't secret tricks. They're simply observations. Little clues that every tomato gives before it's ever picked. Nature leaves fingerprints on every fruit, the weather, the soil, the sunshine, even the way the plant matured. Every one of those things leaves signs behind. The trick isn't changing the tomato. The trick is learning how to read those signs. Farmers have been doing it for generations. Today, you're going to learn them too. Before we start, I want to mention one thing. There's far more old farm knowledge than I can fit into a single video. That's why I've been putting everything together into one place. So families who enjoy learning these practical skills can keep exploring long after today's lesson is over. Now, let's head out to the garden, because the very first test is also the one almost everyone overlooks. Let's begin with the first test. And if you only remember one thing from today's video, remember this. A tomato can be bright red and still have almost no flavor. Most people believe color tells the whole story. It doesn't. Color is only one piece of the puzzle. Nature always leaves more clues than that. The first thing most shoppers notice is color. That's perfectly natural. Bright red catches the eye. It makes us believe the tomato must be ripe. But tomatoes don't all ripen the same way. Some varieties stay slightly orange. Some finish with deep crimson skin. Others keep a little green around the shoulders even when they're perfectly sweet. Commercial tomatoes are often picked while they're still firm and slightly green. They're shipped hundreds or even thousands of miles before reaching the grocery store. During transportation, they slowly change color. The outside becomes red, but the inside hasn't always had enough time to develop the sugars that give a tomato its rich summer flavor. That's why two tomatoes sitting beside each other, both equally red, can taste completely different. One bursts with sweetness, the other tastes flat and watery. Old farmers never judged a tomato by color alone. They looked for a deep, natural color, not an overly bright, shiny red that almost looks painted. Real ripeness usually comes with subtle differences, tiny variations in shade, a soft, healthy glow, not perfection. Nature is rarely perfect, and that's often a good sign. The second test is one hardly anyone does anymore. Pick the tomato up. Don't squeeze it yet. Just hold it. Feel its weight. You'd be surprised how much that tells you. A ripe tomato should feel heavier than it looks. That weight comes from water, but not just water. Healthy tomato cells are packed tightly together. Inside them are natural sugars, juices, and the flavor compounds that developed while the fruit ripened slowly on the vine. When a tomato matures properly, it becomes surprisingly dense. If two tomatoes are nearly the same size, choose the heavier one. The lighter tomato often lost moisture after harvest, or it was picked before reaching full maturity. Either way, there's usually less flavor waiting inside. Farmers compare produce by weight every single day. Melons, peaches, apples, tomatoes. The heavier fruit almost always contains more juice and better texture. It's a simple comparison anyone can make. No special knowledge, no expensive tools, just your hands. Once you've compared enough tomatoes, you'll begin noticing the difference almost immediately. It's one of those skills that quietly stays with you for life. Now we come to my favorite test, because it takes only 2 seconds, and almost nobody does it. Smell the tomato. Not the side, not the bottom, right here, near the stem. That's where the plant leaves its final signature. Every ripe tomato gives off tiny aromatic oils. They're strongest near the stem where the fruit remained attached to the plant. Lean in, take a slow breath. A ripe tomato should smell fresh, earthy, slightly sweet, almost like warm sunshine mixed with green leaves. It's difficult to describe. But once you've smelled a truly ripe tomato, you'll never forget it. Now smell a tomato that was picked too early. You may notice almost nothing, very little aroma, sometimes none at all. That's because much of a tomato's fragrance develops during the final days on the vine. If those final days never happen, neither does much of the flavor. Commercial growers understand this. Their priority is getting tomatoes to stores without bruising. Your priority is bringing home something worth eating. Those goals aren't always the same. That's why your nose can often tell you more than your eyes. One quiet breath can save an entire meal. So before we go any further, let's remember the first three tests: natural color, good weight, rich smell near the stem. None of them take more than a few seconds, but together, they remove most of the guessing. And we're only getting started. The next three tests are the ones old farmers trusted most. Now we've looked at the color, the weight, and the smell. Those three tests alone will help you avoid most disappointing tomatoes. But the old farmers didn't stop there. There were a few more things they always checked. Little signs that most folks walk right past today. The next one is the stem, and you'd be surprised how much that tiny piece of green can tell you. Look closely where the tomato is attached to the vine. If the green cap, sometimes called the calyx, still looks fresh, firm, and healthy, that's usually a very good sign. It means the tomato hasn't been sitting around for very long after harvest. Fresh stems often tell you the fruit moved quickly from the field to your kitchen. Now compare that to a tomato with a dried, brittle stem, or no stem at all. That doesn't automatically mean it's bad, but it does tell you the tomato has likely spent more time in storage or transportation. Every extra day after harvest is another day the tomato slowly loses moisture, and little by little, some of its flavor. Old produce farmers loved seeing fresh green stems, not because the stem changes the taste, but because it gives you another clue about freshness. The best tomatoes tell the same story from every angle. Their color, their smell, their weight, and even their stem all point in the same direction. When several signs agree with one another, you're usually holding a tomato worth bringing home. Now don't make the mistake I see almost everyone make. They walk into the store, pick up a tomato, and squeeze it as hard as they can. I've seen people leave fingerprints in perfectly good tomatoes. There's a much better way. Firmness matters, but only if you check it correctly. A ripe tomato should never feel rock hard. That's often a sign it was harvested too early. On the other hand, it shouldn't feel soft enough that your thumb easily sinks into it. That's a tomato that's already begun breaking down. You're looking for something in between. Firm, yet with just a slight amount of give. Think about pressing gently on the palm of your hand. There's resistance, but there's also life beneath the surface. That's exactly how a good tomato should feel. The flesh has finished developing. The juices have settled. The sugars have formed. Everything inside is ready. If the tomato feels like a baseball, leave it. If it feels like it has bruises before you've even bought it, leave that one too. Nature usually rewards balance, and tomatoes are no exception. So let's stop here for just a moment. Before we get to the final test, let's remember what we've learned. Natural color, good weight, a rich tomato smell, a fresh green stem, firm, but not hard. And don't be afraid of a tomato that looks like it actually grew in somebody's garden. Those little clues begin telling the whole story. But there's one final test, one that brings everything together. And it's the one I always trust before I put a tomato in my basket. Modern grocery stores are designed for speed. Most people only have a few minutes to shop, grab, pay, go home. Few people stop long enough to inspect what they're buying. And honestly, most were never taught how. The knowledge slowly disappeared, not because it stopped working, but because fewer families passed it along. Grandparents knew, parents became busy, children never learned. Little by little, simple everyday wisdom faded into memory. That's one of the reasons I enjoy sharing these old habits. Not because they're magical, but because they're practical. They're the kind of lessons ordinary families once passed around the dinner table without thinking twice. So here's something I'd like you to try this week. The next time you buy tomatoes, slow down. Don't rush. Pick up two or three. Compare them. Smell them. Feel their weight. Look at the stems. Take an extra minute. I think you'll be surprised by the difference. If your parents or your grandparents had their own way of choosing tomatoes, I'd love to hear about it. Leave it down in the comments. Some of the best ideas don't come from books. They come from families. And every generation remembers something the next one almost forgot. Next time, I'm going to show you one of the oldest kitchen habits farm families used to keep onions fresh for months, without refrigeration and without expensive storage containers. Until then, take your time, trust your senses, and remember, the best tomatoes don't simply look ripe. They tell you they are, if you know how to listen. I'll see you next time.